Hi, I'm BBISHOPPCM, and today we're going to talk about retrobriting. Specifically, this Macintosh LCII behind me. Now, spoiler alert, it's done, and everything worked just fine. But I'm going to talk about the method I used and why I recommend it to all of you. One of the more common methods of retrobriting, and the one that I've seen most often repeated in videos and in online forum postings, is the gel or paste method. And what you do is you mix three things: hydrogen peroxide, OxyClean, and cornstarch. You mix these into a paste, and then you spread it over the device or whatever you're retrobriting with a paintbrush, or you just pour it over there, with a pitcher, whatever. Now, I used the paste method for my 2GS, and while it worked, I was not satisfied with the end result. There was a lot of inconsistent coloration, zebra striping, and some of the parts ended up with a dry, chalky feel to them, as if they were left in the sun for a couple of years, in fact. I almost want to call it oxidization. And the reason that happened, so in order for retrobriting to work, it seems to be pretty accepted, widely accepted, that you must have a consistent and high source of UV light. And people who use one of the most abundant and free sources of UV light, our sun, tend to have the most positive results, or the more positive results. While I did the 2GS, I also did a couple of other small pieces, mostly knobs and switches, in a separate container filled with just hydrogen peroxide and dissolved OxyClean. And those parts came out absolutely perfect. But everything else was I had to do them more than once to get the results I was looking for. One of the worst cases of striping occurred on my disk drive cover, which I will have to redo. So it got me thinking, what if we were to do an entire computer in a container, a clear container, filled with water, hydrogen peroxide, and OxyClean? Now, I'm not a chemist, but I did find a forum post, a rather terse forum post, by someone who claims to have some chemical background, who stated that OxyClean and hydrogen peroxide are basically redundant by combining the two. You can have one or the other, but most people tend to combine them. And he had a problem with this because it was redundant. Chemically, again, I believe OxyClean, when dissolved in water, produces some form of hydrogen peroxide because I believe the active ingredient in OxyClean, in addition to all the fillers. A quick Google search reveals that the active ingredients are sodium percarbonate and sodium carbonate. The first is baking soda, the second is washing soda. These substances form oxygen, hydrogen peroxide, and soda ash when mixed with water. Now that is coming straight from a website called everyshadeofgreen.blogspot.com, just to make sure I give them credit. So again, mixing that with liquid hydrogen peroxide, which I believe is diluted to around 30%, is just redundant. Okay. Well, that having been said, I decided. Now, the thing about so when you decide you want to retrobrite one of your vintage computers, there's a lot of preparation involved. First of all, you have to watch the calendar, not the calendar. You have to watch the weather report. You want to find a day that is free of overcast and sunny. You also want it to be a warm day. You don't want it to be sunny and 30 degrees. You want it to be sunny and 60, 65 degrees or higher. Because heat seems to be another component that activates this chemical process. So you need heat, UV light, and a solution of hydrogen peroxide or some form thereof. OxyClean. Okay. So that's well established. But like I said, you've got to do some prep work. You want to find that sunny day, and you want to disassemble your computer completely. I took this LCII down to its bare components. The display, the keyboard, and I did not do the mouse, but I do intend to. This is a small object that can be done really anytime. So once I disassembled my machine, I also removed all removable logos that are printed. The rainbow Apple logos can fade out if you were to retrobrite them as well. Because the ink or dye used to make these logos is UV sensitive. It will fade out. How do I know this? It happened to me on my Apple IIGS's monitor, I believe. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, now this is where the sun is really helpful. Not only does it provide us with free UV light, but it also moves. And if you start your retrobrite process early in the morning, the sun is way the hell over here, and then by midday or noon, it's straight above you. So, of course, that depends on where you are on the planet and what season it is. For me, it's early spring, and the sun is kind of exactly where I need it to be, so I'm loving that. So what I did is I placed my objects in a clear plastic bin, and I poured in water, 5 bottles of hydrogen peroxide, and half a tub of OxyClean. No science went into this at all. I just dumped chemicals into a bin to see what would happen. And, of course, it generated a lot of foam, which can block the sun, unfortunately, from penetrating through to the object inside. But fortunately, I used a clear plastic tote bin, which is clear on all 4 sides. So the end result, now like I said, this is where those 2 methods diverge. Now the paste method is a little more high maintenance. What you've got to do is mix up a paste of peroxide, OxyClean, and what's that stuff called? Cornstarch. Now the cornstarch is an inactive ingredient in this process. It does nothing for the retrobrite process other than provides a way for these chemicals to be kind of painted on vertical surfaces. And it in a way it can keep the chemical compounds in one place for a lengthy period of time. But what you've got to do then is shrink wrap it with saran wrap, and that's to prevent the stuff from evaporating. The problem I have with that method is it dries out very quickly, and you kind of have to go out there and constantly reapply the stuff with a paintbrush. I know that with my Apple IIGS it took forever to get this done because the stuff just kept drying. And what it can also do is, because it's so thin, that any heat generated by the magnification of the saran wrap trapping the heat in there, that heat just sort of stays there and it bakes the chemical onto the plastic. And what I found with my IIGS is it can cause a slight chalky appearance. And again, zebra striping, because the chemical is suspended in in cornstarch. So the chemical can dry out inconsistently because you're not putting it on evenly. It's just painted on, right? It's just, I was not happy with that method. So again, dumping all my computer parts into a big plastic bin, putting it in the sun was probably the best thing I ever did. It was also the cheapest thing in the world too. I've heard some people recommend a hair bleaching cream, which is a peroxide cream. I know one of my friends who did this same process to he tried doing it to a PowerBook Duo with no success, but he also did an image writer too, and he got a lot of zebra striping. I saw the printer that he did. It didn't come out that great, and if he's watching, I'm sorry. I wasn't impressed. Not that he did anything wrong. No, it was just the method that he chose wasn't the most effective. So, in short, putting your computer parts in a liquid solution prevents them from drying out, so you can put it out there all day long. And because the sun is always moving, you don't have to go out there and rotate the parts every couple minutes or every hour or so. The sun does that for you. Now, if you're doing an object that is yellowed on all sides, you will have to periodically go out there and rotate and move, and you should get that. You should get decent results in that way. Now, as for how long it can take to bring a yellowed computer to its factory platinum or white or even cream color, it can take literally just 2.5 hours. I'm not even kidding you. Most of the yellowing on this monitor cover or housing was gone within just 2.5 hours. Actually, I think it was 2 hours and 45 minutes. And I put one of the parts back in there just a little bit longer because I wasn't happy with the results. It wasn't all the way there. And it took about maybe 3.5 hours total. Maybe a little less. So it doesn't take long to get this chemical reaction. Once you have a good base, you have good chemicals, and it's done right, you have excellent, bright, direct sunlight, you can get a computer done in half a day. So no need to let it sit out there all day long. It's not necessary. So again, I highly recommend my method. It was the cheapest. If I were to buy the hair bleaching cream, it would have cost me a lot more money. If I had bought liquid, there's a liquid version of that salon cream, and it's like $20 a gallon. This was $10. To do this entire computer cost me $10, and I still have half a tub of OxyClean left, and I don't have any hydrogen peroxide. I used, so you don't even need the peroxide. That is unnecessary, but I dumped $5 worth of peroxide in there too. All right, now let's take a look at what this monitor looked like before I started, and we're going to go ahead and start that process right now. So here's a good example of what case yellowing looks like. And for most of you guys, this is going to be just useless information. You already know this, but for some of you, you may not be aware of what this is and what causes it and how to prevent it or treat it. So this LCII monitor, made in 1991, has the classic case yellowing. Now, in order for these cases to yellow, for the plastics to discolor, it requires 3 things: UV light, heat. So let's take a look at what I mean by UV light. So UV light obviously is from the sun, generally. But some supporting evidence of that requirement is available right here. These contrast and brightness knobs. Now, I'm going to rotate the contrast knob to a point where you can see where the sunlight hit it and did not. So obviously this contrast knob had spent all of its life in that position right there. So if we rotate it, you can see where the sun didn't hit it, it didn't discolor. Same with the brightness knob. Same deal. Actually, no. The brightness knob didn't change. Look at that. There is no yellowing. Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay, it was right in that position there. Unbelievable. So it takes heat, it takes UV light. Interestingly enough, it takes all of those things to reverse it. So the cause is the cure. What we need to do is we need to expose this monitor to constant UV light and cover it with a concoction of chemicals, primarily hydrogen peroxide. All right, guys, so our next step in this project is to disassemble the RGB display. I have one of those super long screwdrivers, but who's watching anyway, right? All right, so, okay, so let's pull this sucker apart, and for those of you not familiar with servicing high voltage CRTs, pay close attention to the following steps that I'm going to take. Before we really do anything at this point, it's to discharge the CRT. But before I do that, let's see what kind of tube is in here. It looks like a Mitsubishi FUWMVX tube. So this is before Apple went all Trinitron. Because after these were discontinued, they started using Trinitrons in just about everything. So even I believe the Mac Classic, Color Classic actually had a Trinitron. So disassembling a CRT isn't rocket surgery. All you've got to do is, number one, discharge the CRT and the flyback with the proper tool. Secondly, you've got to start disconnecting things. Fortunately, the electronics are all mounted on one board. But one challenge might be this CRT neck board, which is, it's not epoxied in, but there's a rubberized, like a silicone glue. That has to be, you know, maybe we can leave it on. I'd rather not risk it. The thing is, when you're pulling these off the CRT neck, there is a possibility of breaking one of the pins, and that is a very, very bad thing. And these adjustment pots, you don't want to mess with those if things are in good working order. Okay, let me go grab my CRT discharge tool, and we'll see what happens. Now, modern CRTs have self-discharging circuits, so there's a very real possibility there will be really nothing as far as current built up in your charge or of any kind. So how you discharge the CRT is, number one, make sure the damn thing is unplugged and turned off. That's the kind of a fundamental. Secondly, you want to attach your probe alligator clip end to chassis ground. Then, which is right here. And then we're going to stick the probe under the anode cap, which is located right where I'm pointing. And you want to make sure that you have one free hand pointed away from the device, away from anything. Because what can happen is, let's say I have this hand on chassis ground and I accidentally somehow, you know, cause the probe to touch my skin. The current could potentially flow through my body, and it would go across my heart, which would cause me to possibly suffer a cardiac arrest, assuming this sucker's fully charged. Thirdly or fourthly, make sure that there is nobody touching you when you are doing this, because you don't want to be nailed for a murder-suicide. I guess it wouldn't matter, because you'd probably, that's assuming both of you died. Alright, that's not going to happen. But anyway, look, CRTs are dangerous. They can kill you. They can kill you in one of two ways. Number one, high voltage discharge through your body at the wrong time, at the wrong place. Secondly, if the CRT were to implode. Now, when you remove the CRT from the chassis, I'm going to show you what else not to do. Okay, this is very serious. CRT safety is not a laughing matter, and people can be killed. I don't think it's very common, but it can happen. So we're going to slip this probe. All right, let's slide that probe right into the anode lead, and thusly discharging the flyback and CRT. And we're going to kind of keep it there for a couple seconds to make sure, and we're going to remove it. Oh, maybe not. Okay, yeah, it wasn't what I thought it was. So far, I've never seen or heard any sparks while doing this. We're going to use this. This is not the right tool, but it'll do the job. I actually have a smaller pair of these somewhere. Just going to squeeze those clips together and gently remove it from within the CRT proper. There we go, just like that. Then, once this is disconnected, for added safety, you take this and you clip it to the chassis. Right there is fine. Where it will remain throughout the duration of the disassembly. That way, if any charges were to build up, it's a safety thing. Safety, safety, safety. Okay, now we're going to proceed to disconnect everything. It's about 10 in the morning, and I got my bucket of water here. So we're using a clear tub. Make sure you get one that's not frosted. You want it to be transparent, not translucent. And we're going to get some stuff to put in there. And then we're going to take some of Billy May's own nose candy. The brick of in there. Mix it up. There's it. So, a chunk of it there. Now, put in our victim, the monitor. I'm going to put it in assembled, making sure that the really bleak side is what's going to get the sun. See what happens. It's now 20 to 1, almost lunchtime. I got to fire up the grill. And what have we got? Well, so I got the LCII in there now, the main system chassis. Here is the CRT housing, the rear half. This came out marvelous. The color is very consistent all around, and this really wasn't the trouble spot. But this side was certainly yellowed, that I cannot deny. The bezel is pretty good. It's in there. It's still in there now. The one major trouble spot was the microphone mounted area. The area the microphone was mounted to. Well, that lightened up quite nicely, but I can just barely make out a faint outline of a microphone. So I put it back in there by itself with the LCII chassis. The LCII chassis is pointed at an angle, so it's getting direct sunlight from where which is what caused the discoloration on that side. So I'm going to put it in like that, and I'm going to rotate it after a little bit of time. What I've learned is that the most important thing about retrobriting is you can't let it get dry, which is why I'm using the water tub method. I don't know anyone else who's done this exactly the same way, but I'm telling you right now it works, and it works fast. You just need direct sunlight. So that's why I used a clear bin rather than a colored one. And as for the concentration of OxyClean, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. There doesn't seem to be an exact amount. You can't have too much. you can't possibly have too much OxyClean in there. I don't think that's possible. But too little, that would be a problem. Too little OxyClean and you've wasted an entire day. One of the problems that I'm facing right now is I have all next week off work. I said, you know what? I'm not coming in next week. So like, okay, don't. So my boss is very nice. No, it wasn't really. So we got the LCII chassis in there now, and I have it angled so that it makes the most use of the sun on the more troubled areas. So the way the computer sat was probably like, let's say I'm the sun, and that's the computer. That's probably how it spent most of its life, in front of a window. And that's why this side of the computer is really all that's discolored, even remotely. Okay, so here's the LCII system unit, and it's not really that obvious in this light, but I want to point out a couple of things. Number one, there is no chalking or no zebra striping at all in the finish. It actually came out very nice and very uniform, as if it was just taken out of the box. Same with the display housing. Looks perfect. No chalking, no inconsistent toning. It's just perfect. No zebra striping. Now, you can still see the microphone right there. It's not as obvious, but it's still obviously there, if that makes any sense at all. And I believe I really don't know what I'm going to do about that. I think it's just permanent. It is what it is. But for the most part, you know, it doesn't look half bad. I think this is about as good as it's going to get. So let's start reassembling that monitor. Well, it's time to check our work and take a look at how we did. So let's get a good view of this LC2, top, bottom, sides. We're not going to look at the bottom of it because that wasn't really an issue anyway. So a couple of issues that we had on this machine originally. There was clearly an impression of a microphone here, and you can still see it on camera. Unfortunately, because the microphone was attached to the display, it blocked this portion of the bezel from ever seeing UV light. So, you know, what we have here is essentially virgin plastic, and there isn't much we can do about that because the pigmentation did change over time. So, but all the yellowing is gone. Of course, any long-term UV damage is not gone, and there isn't much we can do about that. If the original owner had placed the microphone on the other side, we wouldn't be talking about this right now. In fact, I probably wouldn't have bothered retrobriting it if that were the case. But there is one solution that is acceptable. What I have here is a brand new microphone that was never used, and I can just put it right there. Problem solved. And that's what I'm going to do right now. Discoloration? I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I don't know what you're seeing. Nope, nothing there. Nothing to see. Fake news. So this is the original style microphone, and I installed it. I think it's supposed to be in line with the... Yeah, I did that on purpose. If it doesn't work out, then, well, oh well, we'll do it over. So there you go. Problem solved. Retrobrite success. Does it still work? Let's see. Turn the monitor on. Plug my keyboard back in. Now, you can retrobrite cables. The problem with that, though, is the solution may cause corrosion, and it may actually destroy any plating these contacts have. So I don't recommend it at all. Okay, we've got a chime, we've got a screen, we've got an image. Does it boot up? Let's find out. So she runs pretty good with her original 40 megabyte Scuzzy hard drive. Actually runs quite well. The drive is a little small, and I'd like to put something a little bigger in there. I'm going to start looking, and there are plenty of drives out there that'll fit this machine. I like to stick with the IBM Scuzzy 1 hard drives because they seem to be built a little bit better, and they last longer than the Quantums and the what's the other one? I drew a blank. Quantum and Connor peripherals drives. I have an affinity for the IBM Scuzzy 1 drives. They seem to hold up a little better. They are kind of a crapshoot when you're buying them off eBay because you never know how many miles are on them or what they sound like. What the drive sounds like is very important. If it sounds like it's failing, it probably is. That's the scary part. So, quick word about the Scuzzy to SD card adapters. A lot of guys are buying, and gals, are buying these to retrofit their older Macs with SSD equivalents, or basically, I believe they're using compact flash cards or SD cards. There's a couple of different ones available. And they are available. There is definitely a solution for the failing hard drive problem that plagues some of these older Macs. But I am a purist. I will only go to that as a last resort, as an absolute last resort. I prefer using authentic components in my machines out of philosophy. I don't depend on these machines. If it doesn't work, I can still live my life. So if the drive fails unexpectedly and I lose all my data, well, there's nothing really to lose. I have backups of everything. It's not really a concern for me. I'd rather have the old spinning disc, which adds to the authentic sounds, and if you were to open it up, the visual component to the classic computer restoration process. You just can't replicate that with modern components. It just can't be done. Reliability is less of a concern with certain makes and models of hard drives, and I find the IBMs to be less troublesome. I've had a lot of Quantums fail. The Quantums all have a little problem with these little rubber bushings inside the drives, and they dissolve, and that's why the Quantums tend to fail. The IBMs seemed, whatever they did differently in the production line is in the design of the drive, seems to hold up a little better. Surprisingly, though, my Performa 575 downstairs has a Connor drive that has been trouble-free as long as I've owned the machine. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm going to start looking at buying a bigger drive. I'm thinking something in the 100 megabyte or larger size should be more than adequate for what I want to do with this machine. So I've got one actually in the Classic over here that I've been considering pulling out and putting into this one, but I've decided not to do that just yet. I'd rather just buy another drive. That way I don't. I'll have at least one good spare. The 40 meg drive that's in here is a good drive. It sounds fantastic, and it boots up and formats just, great. No issues there. So a bigger drive goes into here, and at least I'll still have that spare 40 meg should one of the two fail in the future. They probably will, but let's hope not. All right, well, that concludes our LC2 series. There'll be more stuff coming, and if I do find a bigger drive for this, I'll probably do a video on installing that. So thank you for watching, and have a great day.